It's time to talk about America, boys. Ironically enough, most of these teams, not American. But that's not the point. America is a mindset. For this video, I'm going to do something real lazy because I don't have a lot of time right now, but I wanted to get this out. I'm just going to tier list them. Fuck it. So I'm tier listing the moves that have been made in North America, primarily the bigger teams. There's some like smaller ECL teams and stuff like that that have been moved up or have made changes, but I don't really want to talk about them all. I kind of just want to talk about the teams I'm mostly interested, which is like top of ECL level. So we're just going to do that. To get it out of the way first, we have Timberman. Now with Timberman, we have them starting this season, or I guess the end of last season, with plus Carson, and then there are reports of minus Dia, and then the team disbanded. So we could just move them in the died category. We could just leave them there. And the next team on the list, I have Fluffy Aimers. Now Fluffy Aimers did minus News and minus Wolfie at the start of the season. They were set to bring in Vanity and Markey. Then they got rid of Vanity and Markey, and then the team disbanded. So that's another one we could just put in dead. For the next team, we have Liquid. Now for Liquid, they did minus Yakinder, who was struggling a lot on their entry positions, was underperforming crazy, to be honest, and just was not filling his role needed for him on the team. With this move, they brought in Nertz, which I think is a phenomenal addition. The best player on that heroic team from last year. I don't see really any negatives with this. I think this is just a great move. Maybe other than just the problems that they had still going on from last year, but from a firepower upgrade, from a player-to-player upgrade, I'd say this is a banger. Next up, we have Complexity, and for Complexity, obviously, at the end of last season, they had cut Floppy, and then also had lost a Liege, with Liege being bought out to FaZe, so losing quite a bit of firepower in a region where there's not too many players that they could actually buy out, considering players like George that you would want to replace Floppy with had just been bought out by NRG recently, so he still has a lot on his contract, and it's incredibly hard to replace an Elige. Your best bet, maybe the best prospect would be Lake, but even then, like, Lake is seemingly pretty committed to M80 and probably still pretty new on his contract. So with that being said, they got CXCI and Nyx, and both these players I rate pretty well. I rate Nyx quite highly as a player through his mechanical skill. I think he has a lot of mechanical skill he's going to be able to show off once he's in these positions and he's more comfortable. The one thing I did notice when watching him a lot was that I noticed it seemed like he got a little lost in the macro or even in some micro decisions sometimes, but this was primarily before he had played any top tier team, so before he had played in Nouns, anything like that. So now that he's had a little bit more time playing against the higher NA teams, maybe he's had some time to adjust and maybe he'll have an uptick in his performance. I hope so. He did look pretty decent at their Blast performance, but I'm still going to keep an eye out for him. Regarding CXCI, I had rated this guy pretty highly for a while. I think he's been just an absolute farmer in the tier 2 scene. It seems even if he's in a situation where something he's doing is necessarily dumb or not the best situation, he still finds a way to get through it. He still finds a way to get his kill, make his impact. So I'm interested to see how this goes. I'm going to leave them at one move away. I don't want to put them in underwhelming. With losing a Liege and then having already kicked Floppy, there wasn't much they could have really gotten. I don't want to say it's necessarily underwhelming because I think they could actually still build up pretty well from here. I think Grim is going to be super interesting taking in Elige's positions because I think Grim has been super underpowered with Elige on the roster. So I'll put it at one move away and we'll see how this roster goes. I think this roster would be very good with an addition of someone like George. Going into two slightly less interesting ones, we have Wildcard, which I say they're not interesting because they didn't make any moves this offseason. Wildcard just extended contracts with their players, so that was a good thing to see. Good to see that they intend to keep this roster going on for a while and that they have faith in this roster, especially after that major run. I mean, that major run was just, you couldn't have asked for a better one from a team of players who had never even made it to a major before, mostly. So definitely happy with this, so I'm just going to leave them in the no moves category. On the flip side, we have M80, who also have made no moves, but one of their players, Rek, has recently broken his leg, so unfortunately that leaves him unable to play because, as you guys know, it's very difficult to get on a plane and fly around with a broken leg. So unfortunately, Rek is out currently. Keto is in. So with that being the case, I'm going to leave them at underwhelming, but that's only because I don't really like the fact that Keto is playing with them. I think Rek is a much better player. I think Keto can fill the role decently, but I don't rate him super highly. So I think this is underwhelming for now. And I think once M80 are able to get into full force and be able to practice more with their full squad, I think they'll be much more threatening in the future. Getting on to some real interesting moves here, we have NRG. NRG replaced Automatic with George, which I think was a phenomenal move. I think George is maybe one of the best anchors North America has, outside of like someone like a Nafly. But George, I think, is incredibly talented, has a real bright future, so I thought that move was phenomenal. Recently, in a very surprise signing, NRG had signed Bro to replace Breeze, which I thought was very, very interesting because personally, I didn't really rate Breeze that highly. Now, I don't think Breeze is a bad player by any means, but I definitely think Breeze was definitely not performing his best. I believe he's one of the worst performers on that roster with some of the most experience. So I was really disappointed in Breeze, especially because there's just certain situations where in the mid round, he kind of looked like he was lost or he was unsure what his role was in that mid round. So I'm interested to see how Bro comes in, works around that, and what kind of experience he can bring to this team of mostly inexperienced players. Correction, this is not a roster. That's mostly an experience. They have a lot of experience. I don't know why I said that. And so for energy, I'm going to put energy in banger because I think these moves are absolutely banger. I think bringing George in and bringing Bro in are two pieces that are going to make this roster very, very intimidating going in the future. And I think if they can get their pieces all together, this could be a very, very interesting roster. Very powerful. Moving on to Nouns. Nouns had lost George to NRG and also gotten rid of Carson and CJ. And in an interesting turn of events, they had brought in Cryptic, Peeping, who had been promoted from the trial, and Infinite. So with this core of players, we now have Cryptic, Peeping, Infinite, Rush, and Junior. While I'm not 100% crazy on this roster, I think one or two pieces could be swapped out to make this roster even more powerful. I still think this is a really good roster. I think they're going to do quite well in North America, so I think it's pretty interesting. I'm going to leave them in one move away, though. Next up, we have Boss, and for Boss, we had recently seen that they let go of Darty and Cryptic going into that Nouns roster. With this, they had brought in Snav and Wolfie, Snav coming over from that old disbanded Timberman roster. I'm kind of interested to see how this roster turns out. I think the prospects of the three that are the core are really interesting. I'm interested to see how Snav leads them, and I don't personally rate Wolfie too highly. I don't think he's a bad player whatsoever, but I don't rate him as highly as I would the other players, so I'm interested to see how these personalities mesh, and for now, I'm going to leave this roster in underwhelming. Moving on with Party Astronauts, with Peeping leaving to go on that trial with Nouns. Viz was brought back into the roster, which I think is a super underrated player. I think Viz is a super strong piece, and I'm really interested to see how he plays. I hope he stays in the scene longer. I think he's been insane since his first advanced run into playing into ECL teams, and I think he could bring a lot of experience and a lot of just calm nature into this team. Alongside that, Infinite was lost going into that new Nouns roster. So with that, they had brought in Walco and Axe, which Axe being the coach. I think that's super interesting. I think Axe was really good coach back on his time with that RGB roster. I think he's a pretty smart coach. I rate him very highly, especially as someone to bring the vibes up when you have a team like this. They might be a little low on vibes, might be super focused. I think it's super good to have someone to lift your spirits up and kind of get that hype in the room again. Overall, I think this is a pretty decent roster move. So with all that being said, I'm going to move them in banger because I don't really see any pieces that are available that you could one-to-one for any of these players. So honestly, I think it's pretty good moves currently. I think overall the roster definitely still has room to improve, but I think for now, the moves that were made in this offseason were pretty good for this team. Next up, we have a rumored roster, which is the TSM roster. TSM supposed to be consisting of Vanity, Marky, Dia, Darty, and Carson. Now, this team has already been seen playing in the recent CCT tournament under the guys getting info. I think this is a pretty interesting team, bringing in some of the old players with a ton of experience and with some new blood who are more accustomed to the CS2 ways, meta, and how the game has evolved over time. So currently, I think this roster is pretty interesting. I'm going to put this one in banger as well. And next, we have the death of the Undone team, as that roster was taken apart because Skadoodle had gone on to do more IRL things. I believe he said he was focusing on streaming more and still going on to work more events. With that being said, MOTM and Chop have recently brought together the likes of Minus, Wolfie, and Grizz into their team, and they've been signed under the org Marsborn, which is a new North American organization. Currently, they have 2 posts on Twitter. They have 88 followers, so I've seen a lot of people critique, wondering if this is an actual organization, if they actually have funding, if this is just another scam organization that's just trying to get a team into the major to make sticker money, and if they don't make the sticker money, they're just going to pull out. But hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully these guys actually do get the funding. They have a team and organization behind them that supports them. Personally, when looking at this roster, I really do like all the pieces in this roster, but it had been brought to my attention that Wolfie is going to IGL in this, and I'm not a big fan of the op IGL, especially because previously Wolfie has been a pretty decent fragger, so I don't want his performance to be tanked by this, so I'm going to have to move them in one move away, because I believe with the addition of an actual IGL in the equation, I think this roster would be a lot stronger, but I'm still interested to see how this roster performs and how Wolfie performs personally as an IGL, and if his calls seem weak or if it reflects in his op game. And that's it. If you guys liked the video, I would really appreciate it if you liked, subscribed, and commented. Hopefully trying to push out more videos here. I'm trying to keep a consistent schedule going on here, so if you guys want to see anything, leave it in the comments. I've already had some comments that have left me with some ideas that I'm definitely going to be interested in looking into in the future, and if you guys have any criticisms, anything of that nature, just leave it in the comments below, and thank you for watching.